welcome back to another episode of A Path Unfolding. I'm your host, Jesse Brede, and I'm here with my guest today, Jenna LoMonaco. She is currently the head of the U.S. marketing team at ONErpm. Her past work has included working for Glassnode Records, where she served at the head of new media, and she helped launch the careers of artists like Mumford & Sons, Phoenix, Childish, Gambino. She then worked for Cobalt label service. She worked on digital campaigns for legacy and chart-topping artists like Martina McBride, Lenny Kravitz, and a group that I listened to when I was growing up, New Kids on the Block, which I think is awesome. In 2015, you were tapped to relaunch the Island Records digital marketing department. You helped build the online presence of the unknown Shawn Mendes and helped play a key role in developing the social strategy and grew his fan base to millions. You also worked with high-profile acts like Jesse Reyes, Nick Jonas, The Killers, Elton John, Wow, Bon Jovi, Tove Lo, Fall Out Boy, and Demi Lovato. Jenna, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And, we had a couple scheduling challenges here, but I am super fired up. And just so people know, someone on your team reached out. I think maybe they saw the interview I did with George Brea from Symphonic and thought, hey, this would be a good connection. And I totally agree. One of my goals here is to bring forth, the people behind the scenes making things happen. When I read your bio and sort of saw the artists that you've worked with and things that you've been had your hands in, I thought, wow, this would be a great guest to kind of tell this story of one, music marketing, helping build artist careers, bringing people from that relatively unknown to that list is mega superstars. So yeah, just welcome to this show, and I'm glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and get to talk with you.
Yeah. And so obviously I see this through line of music marketing and helping artists in your bio. Take me back to some of the beginning, maybe that Glassnode and working with people like Mumford & Sons and Childish Gambino, kind of 2007. Those are early years for them. Can you share any fun stories or interesting anecdotes from those times?
Yeah, so we started working with Mumford from the very beginning when they were starting to get a buzz in the UK, but really no one knew them here, right? And so I think their first week that album came out, it sold 400 records. It was very, very small. And we really what we did was we took them to every partner you can think of, radio, Billboard magazine, just any partner that we would want to work with, the DSPs at the time. And we just had them do a beautiful acoustic performance for them. And the thing if you've ever seen Mumford & Sons perform live, it is something very, very special. So to see them in a small room, acoustic, was something I'll never forget. And I think really the power of just what good music can do and how it really just captivates people. And the people that work in this business, we all do it because we love music. We're music lovers. It's something that we're passionate about. So when you put an artist like that in front of people, they just immediately fell in love. And so we just slowly started getting the investment and love from all of these different partners. And that's really what helped get their name. And everybody wanted to work with them. And then they started touring. And again, those shows were just incredible. Just some of the best I've ever seen in my 20 years of working in this business. And so I think that Mumford & Sons growth, especially at the beginning, was just a true testament to if you put good music in front of the right people, the magic that can happen.
I love that. Yeah. And Yeah, I mean, their music is sort of undeniable. It's got this campfire vibe, like we're sitting around, and it kind of brings you back to your roots. There's not a lot of fluff. There's a lot of heart. I think it's a lot of people can just see their lives and their stories inside of what they're singing, really connect with it. So that's awesome to hear that, the partners, right? Because ultimately this is a relationship business, and there's people on the other side of the phone and the emails. And if they really love the music that you're pitching, it will connect. They will invest in it. You mentioned they started to invest because they're taking a chance. There's only so many slots available for programming and opportunities and showcases. And so they were like, hey, we believe in this. So that's awesome. And you kind of come from this background of PR and pitching. And I think there's something to dive in there of like the art of a pitch of like, hey, here's where we're coming from. Here's where here's where this artist is. This is where we're trying to go. Like, can you expand on that a little bit? Kind of like how you think about pitching artists?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially right now, like back then, of course, it was important, but I think even more so now, understanding what the story of an artist is, and why people should pay attention is more important than ever. I think even, what was that? God, like 15 years ago at this point, like even back then, you could still, just share the basic story of, not that they were in any way, shape, or form a basic story, but you could, this really exciting new artist, they're getting buzz around the world. They have this song that's starting to spike. Here's what you should care about it. I feel like that it's not enough anymore, right? Because there's so much congestion with how many artists are releasing music. At this time, you really need to have like a good story to go with why people should care about this artist. It's unfortunate that it's just good music doesn't make the difference anymore, but I think that really understanding like the story behind what made them write these songs, what inspires them, how did they grow up, what are the things they care about, what are the things that they want to speak to, I think that's more important than ever now.
Great. For artists, like you mentioned the story, and not everyone has maybe that off, like just out of the like leap out of the book perfect story. So do you think there's work that artists should do to, I don't want to say manufacture, but to craft their story, to tease it out, to pull it out? Like, I think everyone has one, but sometimes, do you feel like sometimes it's just there and sometimes it's not?
Well, listen, I mean, sometimes it's just not right. And then you do try to just go with the strength of the music. But I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about life is that we all do have a story. And especially musicians who are writing these songs, there is a reason, there is an emotion, there's a pain that comes behind those lyrics. And so being open to speaking about those things, maybe it's more, you don't want to speak directly to it, but you want to talk about the inspiration of it, where you grew up, how you grew up. There's always an angle, because we all have a story to share.
Got it. I like that. Someone that I really admire is Childish Gambino. I saw him perform at Coachella, and it was just captivating. And the man is just crazy talented, right? Actor, writer, and obviously musician. I'd love to know anything you can share about him, or kind of any of like how his musical career tied into the acting and that whole world.
Yeah, it was interesting because we signed him at Glassnote when he was still on Community, and I was such a huge Community fan, and it was funny because we would do promo with him, and you watch a person on TV, you get like this idea of their character, and then you realize that's not them at all, and so that was just like a funny experience. I had never had that experience before of like getting to know a person well who's his character on TV. I knew first. But when we signed him, that was for camp. That was his like first. He had a mixtape that was out, and then we did like really like his first big release. And he was in a very pivotal place in his career where he was still trying to like find his place within the hip hop genre in general, and it's so cool to see where he is now and just the respect that he has gained for musically. It's just really great to see. That was a really fun one that I was very excited to work on at the time. And I think that that is a real example of how artists can always evolve, because like there is like a definite evolution if you listen to that first mixtape to camp to like then going to like Redbone, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
It's a huge evolution. And so I think that it's important for artists to remember like you're never pigeonholed, right? And there's you're never stuck in one thing, and you could always evolve. And that's such a good example of that. And like as you get older, you find yourself, and that's part of creating music as well, as you're finding your voice there as well. And so I think that artists trying to rush themselves to find that within themselves, like you don't need to, let it evolve naturally. And I think he's a perfect example of that.
That's really cool to hear. I think, especially coming from a label background, distribution background, to hear you like preach that, I don't preach, but just expound on like, hey, this is important. Like you need to find where you're at right now and not trying to rush that. Again, that kind of comes back to the find your story, right? And as your story evolves, like continue to go back and be like, okay, who am I and where am I at musically? That's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about Cobalt. And if I know my history correctly, right? This is Sony's, the Cobalt was independent, and then Sony developed Cobalt or bought Cobalt.
So this is before that. So
okay, so they were still independent.
Yeah. So Cobalt was a publishing company that then broke out. So Cobalt Label Services was the first iteration of AWOL.
Okay.
And so there was Cobalt Label Services, and then there was AWOL. And Label Services was meant to be more for major label artists who were done with the major label system and wanted to do it themselves. And so that's why we got all of those legacy artists, like you said, New Kids on the Block. We had Boy George, Lenny Kravitz. It was all of those artists that they did the major label thing, and they just like wanted to see what it was like to do it on their own. Got it.
That's interesting, because I see that happen a bit in sort of the electronic music world that I'm in, where you start off kind of independent releasing, you might release with some labels or vice versa, then you might launch your own label, and so that's like the kind of the top of where, yeah, right. and it makes sense, right? Eventually, you as an artist want to try and keep or own as much of your intellectual property, and also just be on your own timeline and be on your own team. So you guys were sort of there, major label services for hire. So you guys knew the sort of major label game and how things worked at the high level, and you kind of plug and play into a team, right?
Yeah, I think back then was when the whole distribution label service model was still being tested out. That was quite a while ago, So, I think it was really in the beginnings of when that model was kind of being first tested out.
Great. Awesome. All right. So skipping just to the next one, Island Records, right? Which eventually Def Jam Island Records became a whole merger there. That's correct too?
So it was Island and Def Jam, and then they merged for a few years, and then they separated.
Okay.
When they separated is when I joined.
Got it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So then, how do you see, like, from from Glassnote to Cobalt to Island, did things, was that a pretty consistent role, or was your role evolving, expanding, getting bigger?
I would say, I mean, definitely getting bigger in the sense of like, Glassnote was a really interesting time because when I started there, I was the fourth employee to be hired at Glassnote, and no one knew who that label was, right? Like it was the very beginning. And we really, in the beginning, we really just had this artist, Secondhand Serenade, which is an emo artist that you would know from a meme now. And that was, I mean, we had success with him, but it was, we were still finding our footing. And then we signed Phoenix, and Phoenix like broke.
Blew up.
And then we signed Mumford, and then Temper Trap, and then Childish Gambino. And so like, we grew. And like, we really proved ourselves, whereas, I mean, Islands is a legacy, like a legendary label within the music industry. Right. And so it was just a different type of, I don't want to say pressure, but pressure that you put on yourself, right? Like an expectation of greatness. And I think, Glassnote was an indie label where we all sat in one room and worked together. Whereas like a major label, there are departments, and the departments handle what the departments handle. And you have to, there's a structure and an order and approvals that need to be done. And so there's like a definite difference with like industry speaking and how things are done. Yeah.
Got it. Well, you worked obviously on some killer records and an artist. Were there any lessons that you took from there that kind of brought you to where you are today? Any pivotal moments in that path where you learned, hey, I really want to do it this way moving forward, or I don't like being in such a big organization? Like, did you kind of find like, was it, the Goldilocks was like, this one's a little too big, you wanted to go back down a size, or anything like that?
So when I left Island during COVID, and I was really in a weird place of like, what do I want to do now? And I didn't want to do another digital job, right? That was something that I really spent my whole career leading a digital marketing team. And it just kind of felt like I needed to challenge myself to do more. I love that job. It wasn't that I didn't love it. It's just, I felt like I needed a new challenge. And so I was really considering starting a digital marketing agency with one of my best friends within the music and she's one of my best friends, but also in the music industry as well. It was something we were really talking about, and I got the call about ONErpm, and it felt like this was like a challenge I needed to take, and I needed to challenge myself to see if I can oversee an entire marketing team and not just a piece of the marketing team. And I always say that if you would have asked me if I could have handled the things that I do when I did my interview, I would have said absolutely not. And I think that you just get in a situation where you're like, you either rise or fall, and I got to figure this out. And I think it's been such a great experience for me because it's shown me I could handle a lot more than I ever thought. And it's exciting to be so involved in so many different layers of an artist campaign. I really have my hands in a little bit of everything. And I will say though that sometimes I miss like being like in it,
Yeah.
but it's fun to be a piece of a little bit of everything. And then also, like, I take my role as mentoring my team very seriously. And that's also a really fun part of my job.
That's awesome. I was actually going to be my next question. Like, you are now like managing people. How many people are you managing?
So currently it's, I think 42.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, and then how do you structure that team? Or is there sort of like a pods of people? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have our project managers, and our project managers are structured by by what we call BU, but it's by genre. So we have a team in Atlanta that focuses on urban. We have a team in Miami that focuses on Latin. We have a team in Nashville that focuses mainly on country, but some alternative too, because Nashville has evolved so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then New York and LA, they focus on rock, pop, dance, and alternative. And then we have different, what we call specialists. So our DSP team, YouTube, advertising, influencer marketing, digital strategy, sync. We have all of our different specialty departments, and each of those departments have a lead, right? So it's not all directly fallen upon me. I have those leads that have their teams that report into them.
So you have something like 8 or 10 leads, and then they have 3 or 4 or 5 people underneath them.
So, yeah.
Got it. Great. Wow. Well, congratulations on that. I mean, it seems like you've led smaller teams, but how have you grown as a manager and a leader in this role? Any fun lessons that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I always say the marketing is easy. It's the human part that's difficult. I think that I love it. And I think that it's taught me a lot about how to work with people. And I've done a lot of workshops, and I go to different conferences to speak, to learn about these things, but there's no one right way to deal with people or to inspire people, right? And so it's really important to make sure that you're speaking to somebody and you're encouraging people in the way that they need you to, right? Like, you kind of have to shapeshift a little bit according to how people want to be dealt with, because some people really need to be I don't want to say coddled, but you need to be a little bit gentler with them. Whereas other people, they want to feel challenged, and you need to be a little bit tougher on them. But, one thing that anybody who's come up in the music industry will tell you is there's a lot of really bad leaders in this business. And I have definitely come across my fair share of them. And I always promised myself I would never treat people like that, in the sense of I don't want somebody going to sleep anxious. I don't want to send one of those cryptic emails at midnight that makes somebody not sleep. It just is icky. And so I work really hard, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I work really hard to be somebody that makes life easier for people and not just cause stress for no reason.
That's awesome. I have my record label, Gravitas Recordings, but I also have a web agency called Lionshare Digital. And over the last, 3 or 4 years, we've grown, and I've worked on my management experience and kind of different ways to learn. And one of the interesting things that we did this year is we had people take the Enneagram and a personality test. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to see those and read those. And then one of the things that my wife's company does, she works at Salesforce, is they're encouraged to write an operating manual for themselves. And kind of what you were
so interesting.
Yeah, kind of what you were saying of you want to meet people where they're at and how do they respond. Some people do need a little kick in the butt, and that'll get them going. And some people really need to have empathy and really okay, I've been heard, I've been listened to, I feel safe, I feel secure. And we all have our, traumas and things that have happened as we've grown up that have shaped us and forged our way that we respond to different types of leadership. So I just find that so fascinating. It's just this endless test and challenge of way of learning how to deal with people. But it seems like you're very well equipped with that. I think understanding how to tell stories and how to pitch and seeing when music resonates with people. There's a lot of reading of people's reactions and understanding and kind of, even projecting what you think someone will might respond to, and kind of anticipating that and kind of relaying that. So yeah, it was just very cool. That's a big team. And tell me, just for anybody who might not know, like, tell me about ONErpm. What do you guys do? What's your, so where do you stand in the marketplace, and kind of who anything else we can kind of expand on there?
Sure. First of all, my dog is snoring right now.
Oh.
You don't hear that.
Can we see him? Buddy. Oh. That's awesome.
I'm sorry if you got that.
No, what's his name? I think it's the human element. It's great.
Ali Ravioli.
I love it.
He's a doodle. He's a dummy doodle. I'm so sorry. You asked a really good question. And
what was it? I forget. Okay. What is ONErpm? Where do they stand? And just like let's. I forgot to set the table there, so let's tell people what you guys do.
No worries. So ONErpm started 15 years ago, actually, this year in Brazil. And basically, Emmanuel, who is our president and CEO, he was living in Brazil, and he saw that there were all these amazing artists in Brazil that were unable to make money off of their music. There was just no way. And so he created this DIY distribution platform that enabled people to be able to put their music up and make money off of it and create a source of income. He worked really closely with YouTube. I mean, YouTube wasn't really monetizing in Brazil at the time, and that became, a huge source of revenue for these artists. And over the years, from there has grown the company. We have almost 44 offices around the world now, and that is all across the globe. So we are everywhere from Asia, Africa, LATAM, obviously the US, really everywhere in the Middle East now. It's just like we are all across the globe. And so in the US, he launched ONErpm, I want to say like 8 years ago. It was just like a year or two before COVID. And originally started as, again, a DIY distribution platform. And when I joined the company in 2021, he tasked me to kind of build up the marketing team, because there were territories like Brazil that were very established. In Brazil, we are, in line with the majors there. We're one of the biggest labels in Brazil. And so he wanted to create that in the US as well. And so I really came in and created all of these marketing departments, we are now able to service an artist the same way that a major label would. We don't have radio in-house, and we don't have PR in-house, and we never will. That's by design. I don't believe that helps us or the artists. I think being able to sign out to hire out rather offers more for them. And so we now work with a lot of artists where we are the quote unquote label for them. I think the only difference is that we try to be really transparent and fair in the deals that we do. No two deals are alike. We base our deals off of percentages, licensing terms. We base it according to what sort of services they need, because not everybody needs the same thing. Some management teams now have full marketing teams in-house. Some teams, they really want our team's expertise on digital strategy and influencer marketing, and that's all they want. And so we're really able to be very flexible with the artists to be what they need us to be and not what the industry standard is.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, as you're describing that, there's sort of this traditional model of, management, label, distribution, and there's sort of these walls between them. And I see that, or even, hiring PR, and like I see so much of the lines blurring and people taking on that that bespoke system and design and for their distribution, and just okay, we're going to meet people where they're at, and we're going to be able to provide those services as they need that. I want to go back to just the foundation and the vision from the founder, and like how inspiring that is, because, when being friends with Jorge from Symphonic, they also really believe in these, and I say this, they like quote unquote emerging markets, but underserved markets where there wasn't the major music distribution and services. And so their music was kind of stuck in that country and not being in this global world where things like YouTube can catapult someone to global stardom. You see what what happened with K-pop. I think, in some ways, I think a lot of roads still run through America eventually, but it doesn't have to be that way. And eventually I think we're going to see it where it won't be that way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really exciting.
Asia and Africa are two huge markets that are real examples of that, where, a lot of music is coming out from both Asia and Africa that is interesting and desirable to people all over the world, and I think another market that we've had a lot of success in, that's kind of still developing territory, is Turkey, where, we've had a ton of success there. We very often have, a few of the top 10 on the charts consistently in Turkey. And I think that that's one of those markets where people really haven't dug in and given the people there a means to and a path to success, and that's been an exciting market for us personally.
That's really cool. My wife is from Turkey, and we visited there a couple times. And I mean, if we go back to the history of the world, it was the center of the world culturally and geographically, and everything kind of had to flow through there, and the spice markets and international trade and everything. So that's really cool. I really love this topic, because I think we've been so America centric, and it's been the center of so much of the world's entertainment and movies. And I think we're experiencing this shift where, and I hope we see this happen with movies as well, and television, where it's going to be this global marketplace, and we're not going to be so stuck within the American ecosystem. And kind of, obviously, I think still LA and New York are these cornerstone places. But yeah, I mean, I would love to hear. One of the things I find really interesting from distributors or labels that sit on so much music, and they just see everything at such a high level. Like, what else are you seeing in the global world of music that's interesting or scary? Or obviously we can talk about AI, maybe we don't have to, but I think people are maybe sick of that. But but what do you see at such a big level? What are the trends and shifts that maybe someone like myself might not be aware of?
Yeah, I think that a big thing that we're focused on, and me personally in my role as my role here evolves, is just how what you were saying in terms of being able to transcend music from territory to territory, and how we're able to do that, right? And I think that especially for ONErpm, because I come from Universal, where if something is working in Turkey or Nigeria or the UK, you have to find out approval on who to go to there and who you can talk to, and are they signed in that territory. When you sign with ONErpm, you sign globally, right? So we are one big global company. And so being able to figure out, okay, we're noticing this month that this song is reacting in these territories, and how are we going to act on that? How are we going to engage in those fans when that artist might not necessarily speak that language? What are the cultural things that are really important to know about each market? That's something that we've been doing at ONErpm, is every other week we have a different territory within our company present what are the cultural things that you need to know about working music, because you don't realize yes, we're all listening to music, yes, we all connect to it for the same reasons, right? But you can't work something in a market where you don't understand the culture, what respect in that culture is, how people engage with each other, what are the nuances in the way that people discover music, they engage with music, how they want their fans want artists to speak to them. So we've really spent this year as an ongoing project to understand culturally how to work music across the globe. And then understanding the pathways to being able to get that music around the world. Because that's something I personally find really exciting is, I started working in music because I was a kid that, like most of us had suffered from depression, and music was the thing that got me through it. And I was like, how do I get music that people need to hear to them? Right. And that was never a thought in my head of like, how do I get this music to people all over the world?
Wow.
Right. And so that's something that I find really exciting right now is like trying to figure out how you do that on a global basis, because I think in the past you were only able to do that if something broke into like a classic hit, right? And I think now we're in this interesting place where you can have success without having a classic hit, and you can get your music out all over the world without having that, number one also.
Love that. And you mentioned like the word success, and I always like to ask this question. Like, I think we, in the past we had this idea of what success meant, and I think what we're learning is like we each get to define success for ourselves. And so it sounds like to some extent you guys really you ask your artists like maybe what their version of success is.
Yeah.
And like you have your version of success. Sounds like you've met this like dream plus of being able to help the whole world access music. Like, how do you think of success? How do you define success in your world?
Yeah, I mean, when I first joined ONErpm, I was having a conversation with one of our A&R people, and we were talking about a song that I worked at Islands. And I was like, yeah, that song was kind of like a little bit of a flop. It didn't do what we wanted it to do. And he was like, that song has 300 million streams. How is that a flop to you? And I was like, well, it didn't go top 5 or top 40. And that was always something that was like drilled in our head at a major of like, if it's not charting on top 40, like you've flopped, you're done, right? It didn't do what it was that it was supposed to do. But I think like that was like such an eye-opening moment of like, oh wait, like that artist made money from it, and a lot of people listened to it, and like that was actually a successful song. And like going back to what we spoke about in the beginning with Mumford and Sons, there are a lot of artists that don't want traditional commercial success, and they did not want that, right? And like that was 2008. Back, right? And they wouldn't go on Twitter, I remember. And I was like, what do you mean you won't go on Twitter? Like, like everybody's on Twitter. How are you not on Twitter? But they didn't want that kind of success. They wanted to tour, and they wanted to do what they loved, and they wanted to make music and connect with their fans. And like, that was their version of it. They didn't need to be superstars. And I think that what we've created at ONErpm is like, we created a path for artists to live really great lives, doing what they do, releasing music, having success, having a really great income without that pressure of like, you need to do more, you need to do more, you need to keep working, you need to dress different, you need to make another video. Like, there's a pressure that comes with that level of success that not every artist wants that, you know what I mean? And I think that that's something that is really exciting, because it creates this pathway for artists to have the type of success that they want. I don't think anybody ever asked an artist like, well, what do you want your success to look like? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I see it. And I feel like this is a new paradigm for artists to like, just not be so consumed with, like you said, they don't need to be in the zeitgeist. They don't need to be on CNN. Like, well, they don't need to be in the major news. It's like a sustainable artistic career where you're, making enough to continue to do what you do and create art, create music, inspire people, heal people with your music, and bring that to the world. I think there's a lot of people talking about it's harder than it ever has been, but I don't know that I always agree with that. Like, I think we focus on like the low-ish payouts of people like Spotify and streaming, but I think you named off a bunch of ways that people can, get to make a successful career for themselves if they have like reasonable expectations, right? You're not going to get a private jet. You don't need one. And even if you did, you wouldn't be happy. That's not the level of success that we're talking about. We're talking about getting to go tour, meeting fans. Yeah. And like really being out there in the world. And I think ultimately touching people with your music. So
we always want to go after the hit, obviously, like if that's what the artist wants, like we're 100% down to do that. But I think that it's important to understand what it is that the artist really wants. And I think that this type of structure allows artists to be heard about what their priorities are for, really this is kind of like a new thing for the artist's vision of what they want their success to look like. I don't feel like that's something that people always spoke about before.
Yeah. So in that way, I feel like the power dynamic has been shifting back to artists. You can break it. You can break yourself on YouTube. You can break yourself through socials, and you can maybe then people will come knocking. And I think you got to be really careful with who you sign with and who you partner with.
Right.
Management, agencies, labels, distribution. I guess what advice on that end have you seen when people are they start to get that buzz? What things do you think they'd be really careful for, just mistakes you've made or just things to watch out for?
I think that really understanding what you define success to look like, right? Because the one thing I'll say is sometimes I've seen artists get a spike of attention and they don't know what they want to do with it yet. And you might not get that spike again, right? There is a magic in a bottle situation where it doesn't always strike twice. And you have to know what you would do in that moment and like the level of engaged you want to be. Because like you said, there's so much happening right now. There's a lot of traffic. And so when you get that moment, it's either go time or you just enjoy the moment and let it pass. But you have to know what it is that you want to do with that. And I've seen some artists, they get nervous and they don't take it up on the moment, and then you're fighting to get that back. And I think a lot of that is like working with a team that you really trust, right? Like that's why you need a team. I feel like there was this like minute where people were like, oh, you don't need a label, you don't need a team. Whatever you call it, whether it's your label or your label team or your distributor or your management team, whatever it is, you need a good team of people who are experts in doing what they do and really trust that they have your best interests at heart, so that when you're in that moment, they can advise you about the best way to handle it and the best moves to make, and you know that you can trust the advice that they're giving you.
Yeah, that reminds me, there was a band that came out of Austin called Ghostland Observatory.
Oh, I remember them.
And they never took on management. They might have never had a booking agent. And like they did everything on their own. And eventually it just kind of petered out. And I always thought, man, like, I'm so proud of you guys for going, because I think they even played Coachella and like they went big. But I agree with what you're saying is like, you got to have a really good team and you want them to obviously have your back and be good people, watch the deals you sign, keep as much of your IP and whatever you can of your deal as you can. can, get a good lawyer, get somebody that's really going to advise you.
Yeah.
But I was always blown away that they never had a real team. And I think eventually, people stopped calling. I think they stopped getting bookings because it just was like, well, I'm not going to book directly with the artist. That's really like almost
It's
unheard of.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the truth is sometimes people don't want to work with you if you don't have a manager. I've seen that happen before. Like you need some kind of team around you because unfortunately they take you less seriously.
Yeah.
Even if it's your choice, it's a bad luck. Yeah. Unfortunately.
That's interesting. Recently, or actually, I'm not sure when this happened, but you spearheaded the formation of ONErpm's global marketing community. Global marketing committee. Yeah. And that was helping align international efforts around artist development and marketing innovation. Can you tell me a little bit about like the vision behind that and kind of how all that came together?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was speaking about how my role has kind of evolved here. So I started out just very much focused on the US, and we grew really quickly, especially in the past few years. We opened a lot of offices globally. And what I realized was, the US, LATAM, and Brazil, we're all very aligned. Our heads of marketing, we speak very often. And what I noticed is like we were having conversations and like I was having conversations with like the head of Africa and the head of Asia, but nobody was like really talking as one, right? And I felt like we're not going to be able to work artists properly if we don't all know each other, have this understanding of how these markets work. What is the best way to work into artists globally? Because it's really easy for an artist to come in and say like, I've always wanted to be huge in France, can we work in France? And so having that understanding of to saying like, okay, well, you're streaming, you don't have streaming numbers in France, but you do have streaming numbers in Turkey, and we have a team there, and this is how we can activate for you, and we suggest you doing these type of marketing activations, and so being able to do that and then also not overcrowding everyone's workload, right? Because you have to remember if we have 42 offices around the world, 44 offices around the world, and every office is working 100 artists, and now everybody wants every artist to work to globally, then we're just not going to accomplish anything for anyone, right? So what does that process look like just like internally of like who gets to be worked and what are those qualifications and like what makes sense and how do we do it and how do you do a low touch international campaign and how do you really get everybody to lean in and when is the moment to get everybody to lean in? So last year I started that process and it's been, a learning curve. Like we're definitely improving I feel improvement this year and then we have really big plans for next year. And so it's something that I've been, again, really passionate about trying to make sure that our international marketing process is as smooth as possible because, again, we're set up in a really unique way. And I think it's a missed opportunity if there's not an easy flow of market, like a marketing pipeline.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think addressing anything on an international level is such a undertaking. So I'm super impressed with that. That's so cool. And I also think one of the things that's interesting about ONErpm, right, is you're not just doing, I know you guys do distribution, but really acting as the label for people, I think is a key, just a key call out for people. Like if you're, just starting out in music or worked with a label, like there's just these different levels of the ecosystem, and for you guys to be both hooked into the distribution and also be a front facing label, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of interconnected pieces there. So, yeah, that's awesome. In your experience, what kind of budgets And I know this is a really broad question, but just like, let's say in the electronic space, if somebody was trying to kind of make an impact, start touring, what kind of budget should they put aside, do you think is worthwhile for a record? Let's even maybe an album or an EP, like, and what do you see working for artists at kind of the early stages? What should they avoid and what should they try to really lean into?
Right. So an exact number is like really subjective to give, just because it all depends on like where they are and their specific needs. I would say having somebody on working with you that very much understands that genre. EDM in particular is a specific genre, a subgenre that I feel you need people who understands that world and you're on your team and by your side. And we do have a specialty team that works that genre. I think that really breaking down, like, first of all, your social media, and there's so many different ways to activate for that genre that I think it's like it's an exciting one to work on because it's not really specific. I think there's so many different fun ways that you can activate there, but knowing how you want that conversation to be with your fans, and really staying true to that vision. Because I think that the kind of persona in that you put out into the world in that genre specifically, it's really important to stay consistent and on brands there. Influencer marketing is something that could be really exciting and seeding. There's a lot of really hyper engaged fans. So fan pages, Discords, really having that connection with your fans. I think if you want to do big spends, like, we work with Ray Volpe and we did, at a home billboards for him for, this new album that's coming. And I think like that was like a really big look for him. And then the festival scene and touring with festivals is super key there.
Huge. Thank you. I think there's a lot of good advice there. Yeah. I mean, I guess the follow-up question is like in the influencer marketing, I've always been curious. I haven't done a lot of that. So I think I know to some degree how it works, but it's such a wild west to me of like, and maybe there's good agencies that I'm not aware of, but I like in the one or two attempts where I've tried to do something like that, it was really challenging to get a beat on like any sort of ROI or any sort of like, how is this going to come back? Like it just feels really crazy. So I don't know. I guess I'm not even asking a question. I'm just saying that.
Listen, with influencer marketing, it's the luck of the draw. I always say I prefer micro influencers. I don't believe in spending a large amount of money for one influencer to do one post. That's not the way. I think it's about repetition. It's about seeing it everywhere. It's just like one post from one big person isn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
I also think you can't create a trend. I think you have to let music sit for a minute on platform and see what starts to build up naturally and boost that. Very, 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 very rarely can you create a trend, and I think people sniff it out and they know what's fake, and they want something that's authentic and from the fans.
I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah, I guess I'll relate to that in the way of like, when we've worked with certain artists and they were starting to get some buzz, then it was like, okay, now it's the time for PR. Like you there's an order of operations. You can't force yourself into the next level. Like things develop, and as they're going, okay, now it's the right time for this play. Okay, now it's the right time for this play. So I think there's a sense of that, of what move, what activation is the right, okay, let's try radio now because we're at this level. Like you must be this tall to ride for this type of thing. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, other than what you've got going on, which is a handful and a lot, I guess I know you have some big news, and I think that you got a big life event coming, so that's exciting for you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm having my first baby this December.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you're adding to the ONErpm team.
Yes. I like to say she's my new assistant.
All right. Well, I hope that you get like a nice break. I hope things can, you can take some time and really enjoy that, because it's obviously a special moment. Aside from that, kind of looking out maybe, a year or two in the future, like, what do you think? What else are you excited about? What else do you feel like, if everything lined up perfectly, what would you like to be kind of happen in the next few years for yourself?
Yeah, no, I think that it's just continuing to see, we have some really incredible talent, especially right now, that, is building. We work with this artist, Goldie Batilier, who her song is the opening title track for Hunting Wives on Netflix. And she's just been getting a ton of buzz right now. We have a lot of really strong, amazing female talent. Sir Chloe, who's incredible, and her a new album just came out. We work with Daya. So there's just like so many incredible artists right now that are bubbling up, and I'm really excited to see where we're able to take them in these next few years, and just like what success looks like for these artists.
That's awesome. And you mentioned female artists, like, I've been really passionate about in my career trying to lift up as many different unique voices as possible. Like, this is a white male dominated industry. Mm-hmm. And I personally find that to be really boring. I think we want as many different voices, viewpoints, orientations, whatever, speaking and creating and being part of this, because it's a creative industry and we need more unique voices, artists, beautiful creatives behind the scenes, right? And I want to stress that as like, you are a creative. Like, marketing is creative. You can't. There's rules to it, but there's also kind of rules to art too in creating. So I think that's really, really great that your ONErpm is lifting up female artists and being kind of, sounds like there's a ton of great stuff happening there. I just love to know, like, as from a woman's point of view, like, what do you see? Are things shifting? Are things getting better? Do you feel like the world is changing? The industry is getting maybe a little less, closed off and open?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that while there is a very clear issue with leadership at the top by both women and people of color in the wider music industry, and it seems to only be getting worse lately with the layoffs, so that's a little disheartening. I feel like that's something that's really great about working at ONErpm is we do have heavy female leadership. We have a very diverse staff. And like you said, that's something that like is not even, it's not something we think about in the sense of that's something we have to do. It's just, we want, like you said, to have different voices. If the only voice in the room is a straight white man, there are things that are going to go wrong. And I've been in that room and I've seen bad situations happen because, you've been like, is that a good idea? And then they're like, oh, it's fine. And look at you like you're crazy. And then turns out it's very much not fine. Yeah. I think there's beauty in diversity and there's beauty in different voices and opinions and cultures. And, I do think that, in some ways it's getting better. I think it's more at the tippity top of the top tier that I feel like we still struggle there. but and that, you know, we'll see how that evolves. But I mean, even look, I mean, you know, I mentioned this to you before, the fact that I am a woman working in music having a baby is like honestly a little bit unheard of, and it's actually more becoming more common. And but like, you know, I worked at a major label for 7 years and knew one woman who had a baby in that time.
Whoa.
And so, you know, I think it's important to have the ability for women to be able to not fear that,
Yeah.
and know that it's okay to like evolve in your life and still be really good at what you do.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, that's why I wanted to ask the question, as I think it's important to talk about it. And like,
Yeah.
I am a white man. I don't know. So I think, you know, my wife kind of talks about, you know, we don't plan to have kids, but like a maternity policy is something that women look at based on a company. And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, and like, are there feminine hygiene products in the bathroom or not? Like, these are things that, you know, even 10 years ago, like that wasn't done.
Yeah.
And now it's like, we're starting to figure it out a little bit. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And thanks for just all your wisdom and your honesty. And, it's clear, like, I think you've blazed a trail for yourself in a really cool way. It sounds like you're up to, you know, some amazing stuff. So I can't wait to connect with you. Where would you suggest people connect with you and follow you to kind of follow your career and connect with you more?
Yeah, sure. So, well, you can follow ONErpm at ONErpm on all socials. And for me, I'm on LinkedIn, Jenna LoMonaco, and then on my Instagram, I'm Jennasaurus.
Okay, I like it. Well, Jenna, absolutely great to sit down with you today. Thank you for your time and sharing all your wisdom. And I wish you all the luck with your baby girl and your career. And we'll look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.